They compared people in VR headsets to people on Zoom, to people doing, I think it was just plain old video paper. Yeah. And what they discovered was that the people in VR ended up being 275% more confident to act on what they had learned after training in VR than in the other modalities, that they learned 4 times faster than classroom training on average, that they were 4 times more focused than online learners, and they were 3.75 times more emotionally connected to the content than the classroom learners working with just paper.
Welcome to Magic Academy podcast. I'm so excited that we have our guests, Michael and Robin, joining us today. They have been a business leader and artist who have been leveraging technologies as tools for artists to tell engaging digital stories to make people further engaged in an experience. Welcome, Michael, and welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
So, curious, can you share with us a story of why MediaCombo?
Yes, the name MediaCombo comes from our recognition that there are a lot of different kinds of digital tools, and we didn't want to specialize in one. We proposed the idea that we can use a combination of media to tell the stories that our clients wanted to tell. That's why we decided to call the company MediaCombo, because we use a combination of media, right? Before MediaCombo, we had another production company for about 20 years together, which was called Owen Electric Pictures. We've had MediaCombo for 20 years, so we've been doing this for a fairly long time.
For over 40 years.
Yeah, pretty much. Not over, but literally just about. Yeah. And as I intimated there, over this period of time, there have obviously been huge changes in the technology that people use. When we first began working, Michael started out working in film. In fact, it was filmmaking that really propelled him to want to have a production company and tell stories with film. And for me, the impetus for working together came from the fact that I grew up very near the Metropolitan Museum of Art and used to go there all the time. And so it was like the place where I went when I wanted to hang out and just wander through the galleries and look at amazing paintings and inject myself into them. And I've always wanted to try and give other people that same experience of like joy and the inspiration and imagination of what it's like to be in one of those paintings, to be one of the peasants in Bruegel's painting, or to be Madame X, or to be in a boat in one of Homer's oceans, something like that. Anyway, as I said, when we first started, Michael started in working with film, but I think most of our early projects were in video. And over time, as the internet came along, we began to work on the web and produce web-based experiences for clients. And then when mobile phones came into being, especially the iPhone, we started to produce mobile applications and audio tours. And then we began to produce interactive touchscreen applications, because the combination of web technology in a self-contained installation. And then when more immersive technologies came along, we started working, for example, with persistent AR in 2016, and then began to work with different types of virtual reality, from 360 videos to sort of Google Street View type tours, to fully immersive CGI room scale experiences. And the thing that unites all of the work that we've done is the fact that it's almost always been for museums, cultural institutions, or educational institutions. Mm-hmm. And so the plan was to take these different technologies, whatever suited the purpose of the client, to tell the stories they wanted to tell. So we were almost always working with curators, with educators, a lot of times with visitor people and marketing people at museums, to help them expand, enhance, and tell their stories, to inspire the people who come to museums, whether it's on site or online, with the stories that the museums want to tell. Because we both really have a strong feeling that the humanities, language, writing, drawing, painting, sculpture, designing, are the way that human beings have always expressed the things that are most important to us from every culture, Western Europe, African cultures, South American cultures, Asian cultures. And so those stories that are expressed through all these different media are incredibly inspiring, affirming, and encouraging in many ways. And we've used digital technologies to try to help curators, et cetera, to tell those stories in ways that make people inspired. It's a long-winded way of saying things.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think the human experience is the most important experience, and as we move into the technology will never stop. It's gonna always evolve and develop and change, but ultimately everyone is having a human experience no matter where they are, what they do. So I definitely resonate, and our audience definitely resonate with you on that as well. Excellent. So Michael, do you have anything to add to the origin story?
Film was definitely the work world that one grew up in. I went to university in England, and I had a job as an assistant film editor in London, but I didn't think my prospects in England were that great. So I grew up in New York City, so I wanted to come back home. And one of the things I did while I was looking for work was volunteer at Manhattan Cable TV's public access department. And that's where I met a group of people who became lifelong friends to this day, all of whom were involved. Most of them were interns because they still were at university. Some of them had jobs working at public access, and I was a volunteer. But we all believed in this idea of using video tech to democratize what at the time was highly centralized. There were 4 TV channels, and that was how you got your news. And the idea was, with video in the hands of ordinary people, they can start using video to tell their own stories. And we actually went and would take the equipment. We borrowed it at night and went to a club called CBGB's and taped bands playing there, including a lot of what would become successful bands at night. So this was this idea that you had this medium that you could do all of this cool stuff with, even though it was not ready for broadcast. It was not ready for professional level applications at that time. And if you think about it, what was happening with public access, or the dream of public access in 1975, 76, wouldn't be realized until YouTube came out in the early 2000s, effectively. That's what it required to make it truly democratic. You have a little camera in front of you, and you can now tell your message, because the logistics of, yes, you could, with very little money, make something in video and put it on cable TV, but then you had to get everyone to watch it. That's what broadcast channels, they had all the resources to put together entertainment that would attract the eyeballs. But just because there was a channel out there on one of your 100 channels on a cable TV box didn't mean anyone was going to watch channel 76. So that's where you have this thing of the technology is ahead of the audiences. So that was like my starting point. I was very interested in technologies that were not quite ready for mass public acceptance. I was interested in interactive laser discs. That was very cool. But again, it would take CD-ROMs before you would have actual people with the way to watch that kind of programming on a large scale.
So you're always on the forefront.
Sure. Yeah.
Playing with the emerging technology. So basically, for people who wanted to see into the future of media and what media can do, you're the one who they should see. Oh, what Michael is playing right now. Oh, okay, that's coming. That's a very reliable indicator. That's fantastic.
Exactly.
So that gets me interested. So MediaCombo, and Can you share with us some cases that you are currently working on that show the philosophy, the strategy, and in particular, based on your experiences in the past and forthcoming, what are some key elements that make or break an engaging digital experience?
I think that the thing that you have to have is some kind of a content hook, right? You have to have a way for people who are going to be participating by watching, listening, interacting, whatever. You have to have a way for them to get into the content. What we try to do is to work with our clients to get them to think a little bit outside of the box, outside of their expertise, outside of their perspective, outside of the curatorial perspective, outside of the educational perspective, to think about what would a person who's not an expert want to know about this? Why would they care about this? And basically it's like, where's the emotion in this object or in this story, that you want to tell? And let's get to that. And that's what will draw people in. And so I think that's really the very first thing that you have to try to describe. And from there, developing a user experience that provides the right balance between guiding the visitor and giving them the freedom to explore whatever it is. Obviously, that's not true for a linear video, but it's true for a mobile app. It's true for an interactive on a touch screen. It's true for an AR experience or any kind of VR experience. And I think in a way, it's also true for these huge immersive projection-based experiences that are happening all over the place now. From Meow Wolf to Van Gogh, they're ubiquitous, really. So I think those things. I think great audio is another significant factor that you really need to have, because that helps you feel a sense of immersion. It gives you more than one sense. It's not necessarily multisensory, but it gives you an additional sense through which to experience whatever the content is. And then obviously, of course, great visuals. Unless it's not a visual project, in which case the audio is even more important. So if I had to just say four, those are the four things. Finding the emotional hook, then the UX design that gives you this balance between guidance and freedom, great audio, great visuals. And you don't necessarily have to have a narrative arc, but it helps so that there's a path that people can follow.
So out of all these projects and pieces that you've worked on, what's the new project that you are designing that actually taps into enhancing our human experiences, such as empathy, connection, communication, diversity, inclusion?
We're developing what would be as much a platform as an application that will attempt to or will enable. It's aimed right now at medical profession students, but it could be secondary school students, and it could also be professions not related, just professional development. Because what we are trying to do is take a pedagogy that you're familiar with, because you've interviewed the dawn of this visual thinking strategies. We want to be able to take that pedagogy and put it in a virtual medium that will be more accessible and scalable. So we're building an environment and that can bring together a facilitator and students or professionals into a virtual gallery space and look at the artworks and engage through the engagement with the art, develop their close looking skills, their critical thinking and communication skills, and then through that, the empathy of understanding that multiple people can have different opinions about the same thing. And so that is a project that we're working on, both in terms of the technical challenges of having spaces that can manage that, and then also basically getting the funding to do real surveys with real students over a period of time that would let us measure whether this can be done successfully in virtual reality. So that's the big project we're working on at this moment, and hope to get off the ground, if not this year, certainly beginning of next year.
It's called VITALS, which stands for Visual Thinking and Learning Strategies. And the idea is that, as Michael said, we are using virtual recreations of art museum galleries and bringing students from different disciplines at the moment. Anyway, it's aimed at students from different medical disciplines, interprofessional group of healthcare students, to work with a facilitator undertaking these visual thinking strategies sessions of looking at art and discussing them. That's the sort of the plan. And we did a pilot actually with 6 students from the University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine, and the U.S. School of Nursing and General Studies, and the Lowe Art Museum. So we're partnering with those 3 institutions to develop this project and see if we can make it viable in VR. And is a really great topic for discussion because the content of paintings also, when you're asking people to look at what's going on and to talk about what's going on, they have to put themselves into the painting. They have to put themselves into the role of the people who are in the painting, and then they have to begin to empathize with those people. So they not only extend themselves empathically into the roles of the people that might be in the painting, but as you said earlier, Michael, listening to other people give their perspective about what's going on in a painting adds to their understanding that they themselves may have a particular bias based on their own interpretation of what's happening, and other people have other equally valid views on things. And so it helps to develop respect among people for divergent views. It helps build team coalitions, and all of these things are really important in healthcare. It helps to promote communication, basically. And one of the amazing things is that 40% of deaths in the United States are due to lack of communication between healthcare professionals. So this kind of training is essential, and actually people in the healthcare profession totally get that. And this method has been shown to be very helpful for students in real life. And so we're hoping to replicate that in VR.
The other thing that I really like about it is that and this is not the VR that does this, it's the pedagogy, it's the visual thinking strategies, is it democratizes the process of looking at art. You're not telling anybody why you're looking at this painting. You're not saying who the artist is, you're not saying when it was made, and you're not talking about the circumstances of its creation. You're simply asking people, what is it that you think is going on in this image? And in telling that story, they're empowered to bring their experience to bear in parsing what the image is. And that completely changes their relationship to the artwork from the classical process of going to a museum that everything has to have been curated and is special, and we should have some understanding of why it was all assembled. You're reversing that. So we've done, not in the current thing, but we've done, because we've been trying to see how to make this work in virtual reality settings and what the value is. We did this with a group of kids on a Cherokee reservation in Oklahoma who had never been to a museum, that they just have not been to one. And so they land in this little VR world that, again, it's not fancy, with just white walls, literally like a gallery, and a series of very diverse but interesting paintings. And they just very quickly completely got into it. Because again, we were asking them what they think is happening. And they were very perceptive and very quickly joined in, and it was a great experience.
As you said, there's no judgment. There's no wrong answer here. And so it does level the playing field. It's not about art history at all. Anyway, that's...
Yeah, I wanted to bring our audience up to kind of the context of what we've been talking about, the visual thinking strategy. It's developed by Philip and his partner, visual thinking strategy constitutes a very simple three-step questions. And the first question is, what do you think
What's
so
going
we
on
look
in
at the
this
piece of art.
picture?
What do you think is going on in this picture? The next question is, what did you see that makes you say that? So you're
Yeah.
providing, you can point out whichever thing that you see in the painting that supports your statement. And then we continue this cycle and say, oh, what else can you find? And then there's a facilitator who's guiding this conversation.
Yeah, our
So
partner at the Dean of Nursing Department, is one of the co-PIs on this project with the NIH, she calls them essential non-technical skills. I mean, doctors have to have them. And not just doctors, but the nurses and the physical therapists and the x-ray guys, everybody has to understand how to look at the patient and then be able to communicate what they're saying
And
to
other
other
people call
people on the
them,
team.
and other people call them power skills. They have a lot of different,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, I think I like the power skill much better. I think there's an evolving trend where people
Mhm.
see those skills as more of a
More and
power
more
skill because
important.
that's what makes a difference within human experiences, and
Yeah.
that's make or break the team dynamic or the relationship between healthcare workers and the patient.
And so
And also
far,
be able to stay accurate. If this is a diagnosis, you have to be
yeah.
accurate. So reduces
So,
it.
so far, these skills have not been mastered by artificial intelligence yet. So there's still like a human component of things that really needs to be there every time, every time.
Yeah. That gets me curious. So how do you exactly measure the impact of an immersive environment?
There are a lot of studies have been done, more and God, more and more. It's amazing. Technical studies that are being funded by the NIH, for example, the National Institutes of Health, by the Department of Education, by many government agencies, looking at the efficiencies that can be accomplished by training in virtual reality. And they take time to do because obviously, if you're measuring someone starting from here and ending up here, it takes time. You have to have, it's usually a more than one session that really allows you to learn enough of what you've been doing. But it's quite interesting because there's one study that was not done for a government agency, but was done by the firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they did a 10-month study about 3.5 years ago. And they were actually testing the potential of teaching soft skills, a certain component of what they call soft skills or interpersonal skills, power skills, to middle managers in different companies. And they compared people in VR headsets to people on Zoom, to people doing, I think it was just plain old video paper. Yeah. And what they discovered was that the people in VR were ended up being 275% more confident to act on what they had learned after training in VR than in the other modalities, that they learned 4 times faster than classroom training on average, that they were 4 times more focused than online learners, and they were 3.75 times more emotionally connected to the content than the classroom learners working with just paper. So those are really massive statistics. And there are very explicable or very clear reasons for why those stats exist. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that when you're in an immersive space, you're not distracted by whatever else is going on around you in the environment. When you're not on a Zoom call like we are, you don't have, and not that we have this yet, but if we stayed on for longer, Zoom fatigue, you're not suffering from that. And when you're in an immersive experience, and especially actually either whether you're with or not with other people, you feel like you're there. You're really there. There's this thing called presence, right? You have much more of an emotional engagement. You feel physically there. The connection between mind, body, and emotions is pretty tight. And so you ultimately have more of an emotional connection to what's happening and you're more engaged. And consequently, you're learning more. Not necessarily facts, but how to behavior. That's what soft skills are about behavior.
You have a muscle memory from feeling like you were physically in, even if you're sitting down and you're just moving your hands to teleport around the space. You come away, you take your headset off, and in your mind, you remember like you were in a place with other people. You don't have that at the end of a Zoom call.
No.
You never get that real feeling
Unless you're really unless in real life.
In a real experience.
Yeah.
And that is the real thing that's very hard to convey to people about the power of virtual reality, because it's just used really for gaming. And for the most part, in terms of popular people, it more and more, it's absolutely being embraced as a simulation training tool, all industries. And one of the reasons that we feel that healthcare educational institutions are a good market for this curriculum is that it's not about buying the equipment. They all own VR headsets because they're already using it to practice medical procedures or learn anatomy. There's a huge amount of technical training materials that have been produced in this field. So you're not talking to an institution about buying equipment, train something new. It's just saying, we propose you use some of those headsets for a different purpose. It's just allocating their usage, but it's not buying equipment or the whole process, the infrastructure to maintain it. They already have that in place.
Yeah, and once the infrastructure is in place, we usually, the next step is the content. What else can I use this to do?
Yeah, and that's why in secondary schools, even schools that received gifts of 100 headsets from Meta a few years ago, it was very hard for them to, who's going to run it? The actual classroom teachers are too busy just trying to stay on top of their students. It has to be either an IT department, if the school even has one, or the library. Those are the two typical departments that would be responsible for loaning out VR headsets. And you have all the issues of sanitation. You've got to keep them clean. You've got to have them plugged in and ready to be powered. You have to have them be able to be connected to a good Wi-Fi connection or they don't work. So all of these are maintenance issues that come between the actual successful deployment of the technology, even if you have the money to buy it. Same thing with museums. We have that all the time. Yes, we'd love to have a little VR experience, but you have to have someone then who is literally, that's their job when visitors come in, to make sure that each visitor gets handed a headset that works and that they get to know how to put it on, and that if it needs to be connected to the Wi-Fi, it's going to work. All of these things are not just going to happen. You just don't have a headset there that's going to look after itself. You need people to look after it. And again, it's part of our job whenever we're talking to someone about having all of the resources to deliver the technology to their intended audiences. And that's why we think that health profession schools are the most prepared, a group, a potential market that is ready to accept it.
And what role do you think curiosity played in terms of curating a effective learning experiences for, say, medical professionals?
There's a lot of different ways. Sometimes you can just provide people with an environment, and the environment is designed in a way to stimulate them. Sometimes it's an object that you give in front of them. Sometimes it's a question that you ask. I wouldn't say there's just one way to inspire curiosity.
I think it's curation. In terms of what we've been describing, the Vitals Project, it will be important to select images with the partner institution that are most relevant and provoking for the group of people who are going to be asked to look at it. You don't necessarily want to challenge them in terms of trying, but at least have something that they'll have an opinion about. And that's with everything. You have to figure out what will get, ideally, some kind of emotional response. It's an image that will do that, and then you have a conversation about it.
What role do you think AI would play in this immersive environment, trying to facilitate?
I think and it's not something that could be done right away, but I think in the future, in terms of what we're trying to do, which is this group experience, because we're simulating real life visual thinking strategies. So that means you need a group of students that can have the multiple opinions and the range of reactions, as well as a facilitator. As I said, I think at the university level, that's something that they can deliver. They have the need and the people and the equipment to do that. When you're dealing with secondary schools, it's much higher challenge. So maybe you can use AI to do things like simulate the facilitator so that you could actually add a few of non-player characters so that you could use all of the experiences of real VTS sessions, record them, and the facilitator responses and how they manage. And if you do this enough, you'll build up a language model that you can use to train people so that you can make it a single user experience that simulates a group discussion. I think it'd be useful to try and do it and experiment, but it will take some work to be effective, because there's nothing worse right now when you are dealing with AI characters. There's sometimes a real lag between when you ask the question or say something and then you get a response. And that's really not conducive to the kind of engagement that we're trying to get. But I think in the future, as things improve, that will be a possibility.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So then I'm curious, are there any like other innovators or startups that you've been following that you can guide our audience to kind of continuous learning about virtual reality and visual thinking strategy?
I can name a few individuals who've given talks that you can find on YouTube, most likely. Michael, you can chime in, but so I'm just going to give you some. So, for example, there's a brilliant woman called Monica Ares, Ares, and she's now at Imperial College in London. She is positive and optimistic and also really smart about integrating AI into education. Then there's the Virtual World Society, which is all about bringing people together to use virtual reality for good, and just a ton of really smart people there. There's a very smart AI person called Ian Beecraft, and he has a company called Signal and Ciphers, CIPHERS. There's a thought leader called Neil Redding, Redding, at Redding Futures, who has a whole philosophy about the interconnectedness of things and how we need to really be cognizant of everything that we're doing in order to make sure that we are building the best world that we can. I'm being a little bit conceptual here, but Neil is pretty specific. He's really good. And I would also recommend a woman called Amy Peck, who has a firm called Endeavor VR. Oh, and then the Stanford Human Interaction Lab is a really interesting place where a lot of interesting VR work is being done. So those are some that I can think of. Michael, you maybe add a few more?
You hit the cream.
That's great. And let's talk about the magic part, which is my favorite part, and I hope our audience are excited too. So the first question is, and for both of you, Michael and Robin, what did you enjoy creating so much that time disappeared when you were around 11 years old? Whoever wants to start first.
You can start, Michael.
I've always been very interested in imagery, and I know that I was given a camera by my dad, who had recently come back from Japan, and I didn't do it a lot because you had to buy film and then have it processed, but I got very hooked on that process of taking pictures and what it is to create images. And I just developed from there. I was at a school that gave me access to Super 8 video film cameras when I was older than 11. But so I was able to develop this skill over time. And I was fascinated just with this process of how you make things work. And so that's the magic to me, is I like putting the parts together. I consider myself a creative producer, which is actually the bringing the bits together, each with their own little problems. And I try and learn what are the technical issues or what are the actual execution issues from, I don't know, everything from like when you look at a location, you want to know where the sun's going to be at a certain time because you want to film there when it's going to look the nicest. All of these are things that you think about when you plan a project, that some require filming, some just require pulling together existing images. The projects are all over the map, but you take your life experience and you just know how to put the bits together in the best way. That's, to me, the magic. It's how you make these kind of audiovisual communications, whether they're virtual reality or old-fashioned video, together.
That's beautiful. It's like a movie director, but more like interactive and always looking for ways to integrate technology and media into an environment that you'll want to be in. Beautiful. Beautiful. Robin?
Yeah, I think there have always been two sides to the things that I've enjoyed. One was, like, for example, when I was in all the way through school, from K through high school, I loved art class. I loved going in there, paint. What I loved about it was looking, like really, I liked really looking at something and trying to recreate that through my own body, in a way, my own eyes, my own mind. But so while I loved making art, I didn't ever really see myself as an artist, which I think is how I've ended up working with art or doing things about art rather than making art. And at the same time, though, I loved, this is going to sound really weird. when I was 12, I had a friend, we had a business. We did birthday parties for little kids. And I liked being around little kids because they have this optimism and they're laughing all the time and they have tons of energy. But so it was always challenging to try to figure out, like, what can we do for them that they will enjoy and that they won't go crazy with, which has translated into the way that I have ended up relating to clients, which is listening to them and trying to figure out, what can we do for them? What is the technology? What is the perspective? What is the story? How can we help them communicate what they want to do? And those two things have, I think, propelled me back and forth through I think that this project that we're working on now, again, combines those two things, because it's all about using art as a way of communicating, as a platform for helping people communicate. So it's just a different way of combining those two things.
I like how you see art as a platform.
What we're doing is like media literacy. We're helping people learn how to read an image or read an artwork or read a text. It's the same skills that you would use.
Yeah,
it's about becoming more aware, right? It's about awareness, right? And I think part of what I loved about making art when I was younger was having to be aware of what I was looking at if I was trying to recreate it or use something in it.
That's beautiful. Was there any particular challenge that you have to go through that helps shape who you are or helps shape the business?
Oh my gosh, just the challenge of running a business. It's, insane, right? There are so many things that you have to think about, and those may not be the things you want to think about. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. I think
from a challenge perspective.
Challenge is always going to be managing people's expectations.
And that too, yeah.
And it's people who you collaborate with creatively. It's people who you are offering your services to in a business. You want them to be happy. That's the total goal. But making sure they're happy also means that they have an understanding of what they're going to get. And that often you say, we're going to do this. And if you have completely different views of what that is, somewhere along the line, someone's not going to be happy. So it's really from the very get-go, when you embark on a project, you've sorted it out. Everyone understands what the other is thinking or expects.
Yeah. And in life, is there any chance that we have to come through as a human being, like what we said, like human experience? Were there any future challenges that we have to overcome?
That's the main one, communication. Right now, if you just go to a bigger level, there's a huge problem in communication in this country and in the world, yes. So part of the big problem now is people are just have a view, and you can't even discuss the opposing views because there's such a great difference that you can't even begin to talk about individual things. It's just such a hard line. And again, that's what we're hoping, that away from any kind of hot issues, by getting people to be critical thinkers, there's a basis for understanding. There's a basis for everyone to be able to explain themselves and come to some kind, even if they don't agree, at least have an understanding of what it is that they're talking about. So that to me, it's enhancing communication.
Enhancing communication and find a common place where different views does not collide, but
It's about being able to respect difference and not be threatened by it, and be able to empathize with it.
So I will conclude this podcast and just one word. So Michael, what do you think is your magic?
Creation.
Indeed. Thank you, Michael. Robert, what do you think is your magic?
What I was going to say, what I think Michael's magic is its sense of humor.
Creation and humor.
So mine, I don't know what it has been, but what I think it is now is being able to be generous with what I know and what I've learned after being alive for so many years.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Robin, for this wonderful conversation. And I hope our audience had a great time tuning in and listening to our stories in this episode. And if you want to find and continually communicate with our guests, check the show notes below. We will include all the information about our guests, and feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn, on their business websites. And thank you again, Michael and Robin, for sharing your time and your story and your happiness, humor, struggle, magic with us.
Thank you too. Thank you very much, Gianni. It was really a pleasure. Thanks a lot.